Okay, good evening. I'm Teresa Ronnie. Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to introduce our panelists for the day, the topic for the day, the panelists for the day, a few do's and don'ts during today's discussion. And then we're going to dive right into the topic. We're discussing and we're unpacking carbon sequestration projects and the potential they carry within the scope of nature-based solutions. We are joined today by three teams actually. Team Global Carbon Council. We have three people from Global Carbon Council. Thank you so much. First person that I want to introduce is Dr. Jessie. Doctor is actually a pioneer in implementing AI and satellite imagery for digital MRB. So she brings a very crucial perspective on scientific rigor and technological integrity of every project. She is the Associate Director for NBS at GCC. Another person from GCC that it's my pleasure to introduce is Dr. Wojtek. Dr. Wojtek Galinsky is the Director for NBS at GCC. He is, I think in the organization, he's the highest level of authority on technical and regulatory requirements for you to establish credible and permanent carbon sequestration projects. He will talk about how GCC helps developers by helping them become aware of all the opportunities that they offer within the regulated and voluntary carbon markets. So that's going to be interesting. The third person on our panel from GCC is Shomik Biswas. Shomik is a Senior Manager of Methodologies at GCC. And his role there is to make sure new methodologies are scientifically sound, which is very interesting for today's conversation. They adhere to international best practices and they deliver measurable additional carbon credits. That's Team GCC today. We also have with us Chinmay Tonse from Good Carbon. Good Carbon is an investor and has a capital market perspective. They are an aggregator, portfolio builder for the carbon markets. Chinmay is responsible for directing the strategy and how investment flows for high quality NBS projects. Particular focus on Asia as a region. So we're very, very happy to have him here. Very interesting that emerged out of our discussions is how his core expertise lies in due diligence and how Good Carbon has these rigorous evaluation parameters for projects, which are about 160 plus critical metrics, which go above and beyond standard registry requirements. So it's going to be a very interesting conversation to have the dynamic that Chinmay brings in with capital that is getting deployed into projects, which may or may not be verified, but have bankability, scalability, and they are aligned with the kind of robust climate targets that we set for net zero transition. The third team is from ProClime. Bipin Charles represents Team ProClime. He is the principal expert and head of AFOLU, which is agroforestry and land use for carbon projects. He's actually a veteran at designing, developing, and executing agroforestry and land use projects. His expertise, just like Dr. Jessie, is in geospatial data and ecological niche modeling, so that there is long-term environmental and community integrity of carbon effects. Bipin actually focuses on practical realities of project execution, risk mitigation, scaling of AFOLU projects, that generate significant benefits, and within the framework of CCB, which is climate, communities, and biodiversity. He will also touch a little bit about the theory of change that he practices. We're very happy to have Bipin here. By way of introductions, it would be incomplete if I don't introduce myself. I'm Teresa Ronnie. I head marketing and brand at ProClime. I specialize in translating complex technical policy information in a compelling, clear narrative for C-suite executives, for investors, and for the public and general audience. I am the moderator for today, and I will ensure this discussion bridges the gap between technical verification and market demands for credibility. all of that said, today's discussion, I'm going to first hand off to Bipin, where he will talk from the heart of nature-based solutions, bringing carbon sequestration into the market, voluntary in the case of India, what they need to prove in order for them to be credible and financeable. In addition to Bipin speaking, he's going to present a presentation, so please do share your questions in the Q&A chat that we have. Kindly mute yourself if you're not already universally muted. And when it's time for you to talk, kindly do speak up and be heard. We have polls in the poll section. Kindly participate in them. React, please do, react on any point or any conversation that you resonate with. Kindly react with the emojis. And we look forward to having a great discussion. Bipin, over to you.
Thank you, Teresa, and thank you, everyone, GCC team, Chinmay, and everyone. So, what is net zero? So, net zero is nothing but it's all about balancing your emitted greenhouse gases with removed greenhouse gases, which means that whatever the company is liable for, emitting, and it should be sequestered. So why do we need such kind of net zero emissions? Because we have a global target of limiting the global warming for 1.5 degrees as per the Paris Agreement. So everyone is under the constant effort that to control the global temperature over 1.5. At the 1.5 degrees centigrade, and to bring out the balance in the nature. So. Many companies take different routes. For example, affiliate routes, which is also called as nature-based solution. So here we focus on multiple themes or multiple land uses. For example, it can be agriculture, or it can be forestry, and it can be other land uses. So affiliate generally represents agriculture, forestry, and other land uses. So here people come together, roll out various projects, implement various projects, and give a substantial benefit to the nature. So while designing this project, we should well keep in mind that how we are benefiting in terms of climate, and how we are utilizing the local communities, and implement your project and bring benefits to the climate and the biodiversity. And of course, biodiversity again is completely dependent on the communities and the policymakers and wildlife managers and so on. Like each project, when you design, you should keep in mind that you give a substantial benefit to the climate community and biodiversity. Next slide, please. So when you're developing nature-based solutions projects or affiliate projects, you have multiple things in your hand, multiple opportunities in your hand. The first opportunity, or the best opportunity, I would say from my experience or from the global experience, that ERR, which means afforestation, reforestation, and revegetation. Different countries in the world, or different countries in the tropics, have a different understanding and different way of doing the things, and different policies and different laws, everything. So when you're doing afforestation, reforestation, revegetation, it brings lot of benefits to the climate community and biodiversity. When I say benefits, the afforestation actually removes the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, gives out the oxygen, and it sequesters the carbon and store it in the trunk. And then we measure that how much we have sequestered and so on. Now, if you go to the forestry, we have several other topics or the projects that we can design and implement. RED projects, reduction in emission from forest degradation and deforestation, and also improved forest management, which is also known as IFM. We have wetland restoration and conservation. So we have multiple opportunities available to us in the affiliate sector to implement the things based on your problem statement, based on your region, based on your objectives, based on your budget, etc., based on your interest, expertise, everything. You can design your projects and implement it over a period of time. When you are implementing the project, it is always that we need to ensure that we have a scientific team with us, and also the carbon portfolio managers with us, or the carbon part of it. And we should have an appropriate methodology. We should have an appropriate registry to register the projects and implement the things. You can adapt frameworks, especially the most common framework that I've seen here is being adapted is IPCC, that is International Panel for Climate Change. Out of this IPCC, there are several registries have come up, and you can use those registries based on your target or the nature of achievement or the kind of projects that you're planning to do. Next slide, please. While we are implementing these projects to sequester the carbon or to mitigate the climate change, or enhance, or in other words, to build the adaptation towards climate change, we face several challenges. Each step is a challenge. Let's say the first step is that baseline assessment. So when you're doing the baseline assessment today, you come up with certain variables and you do your baseline assessment. Tomorrow it might not be useful at all. The world would have changed. The expectation of the world would have changed. So when you are designing the baseline, you should try and keep all the interrelated variables captured, and the data is captured accordingly to your variables. And then here you can use many of your technological solutions, for example, remote sensing, or drone mapping, or etc., whatever it is based on your this thing. So not only the technical challenges, you will face some regulatory challenges as well. Today we have certain set of regulatories in the place, but tomorrow it might change based on the expectations of the world. So, and also you might do some budgeting to implement the project. Your budget might become outdated. For example, you might budget thinking that the inflation rate in the implementing country would be 8% per annum. Next year it might change to 10%, or it might reduce as well. And you might find some experts, and over a period of time that experts will keep moving. You need to find a backup, and then you will establish some nurseries. That nurseries expectations might change due to increasing the inflation rate, so on. So, and also when it comes to social and environmental concerns, for the people today, let me say I plant tree A. It might be beneficial for me, it might be beneficial for the farmer, and it might not be beneficial in the eyes of the government, or it might not be beneficial in the eyes of scientific community. So these are some other challenges that you face while you're developing the project. Next slide, please. So when you are building the project, it should be of high integrity. You should have a transparent methodologies put in place, scientific and also a robust measurement, reporting and verification tool in place. And then it should be conservative, or else people won't accept you in this world. So whenever you are doing the things that you need to report it accurately, suppose if I have planted 10 trees, I should report it 10. If that measurement is sum of all the trees is 10 dBH, I should be transparent. All this matters while we are building the carbon projects. If we don't practice these kind of the integrity or the trust in the market, then it is very unlikely that our project will get registered and see the carbon funding. Next slide, please. Some of the solutions that what we thought would be beneficial for a period of time is that building a robust monitoring, reporting, and verification tool. For example, I can use the remote sensing data to showcase my or to report my emission reductions or removals. Then I can use some policies like ICVCM or VCMI and so on. I can give some good benefits to the communities in terms of climate community, and in terms of educational benefits, then health benefits, job creations, and so on. Utilize the community, utilize their traditional ecological knowledges, and implement the things. So these solutions will make your project successful in the future. Next slide, please. So that's it from my side. If you have any questions or something, we can take the questions later. Over to you, Teresa.
Fantastic. Thank you, Vipin. That was wonderful, actually. And, you've just brought it down to the same question that we are all grappling with today, which is basically how do you ensure high integrity projects in today's market, and how do you bridge the gap in the shortage of high integrity projects? And I'm going to bring this now to Chinmay, because Chinmay represents the marketplace and the developer, and he looks at it from the investor's lens. So when we're talking about high integrity projects, or we are talking about permanence in a project, or we are talking about community lens in a project, I think bringing Chinmay's view from Good Carbon as to if he was to do a little bit of future gazing, and this is a term that we've been kind of toying around with within ourselves. If you have to just see where the market is today, Chinmay, and if you have to look a little ahead to see the shortage of quality projects that exist in the market today, how we're going to bridge them with premium projects mapped against premium buyers. What are you seeing? What are the signals? And how are investors choosing sequestration projects? Over to you, Chinmay. Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. I mean, I should first of all say thanks for having me here. And Teresa and Bipin, you've made my job a bit easier today. Teresa, you used this word bankability. And Bipin, you also pointed out the importance of setting up projects the right way. And one key element of that is transparency, right? And before we go into future gazing, let's from a simple terminology perspective, let's understand what nature-based solutions is. I mean, anyone who knows me has probably heard this 10 times from me. Basically, nature-based solutions are a bunch of promises at early stage, right? So it's a promise that a project would be designed. It's a promise that the project would be implemented. It's a promise that the project will perform. And it's a promise that the performance is permanent, right? And now, ignoring the environmental element of it, I mean, all of us who do nature-based solution, we love what we do, right? But let's talk from an investor point of view. Let's talk from a CFO point of view. And the biggest risk, challenge today for scaling is capital, right? And where is the capital coming from? The capital is coming from investors / CFOs. And if you look at investor, the investor has to have a certain amount of craziness in his head if he were to invest in NBS, right? I mean, he could go into a real estate investment, which provides a much safe, secured ROI, which you can put down to the penny on your book. Still, they chose NBS. And if you look at CFOs, they could go with the renewable project, right? But they still choose to invest in early stage nature projects. Why? They believe in the impact that we are able to deliver in the mid to long run, right? Where is the market today? It's very clear. We are heading into the last phase of the year, and it's very clear that the corporates who have to offset this year, they have no credits in the market, right? There's no high quality removal credits, or there is very minimal credits in the market. Why is this? Why are we in this scenario, right? Look, it's established that there is, by now, look, if you look at past 5 years, it's established that there is a strong demand for nature-based solutions, but there is shortage. Where is the shortage coming from, right? First, it takes time. It takes 7 to 8 years for a project to reach fair amount of maturity. That's the pain point, one. If we talk about nature-based solutions, these are also solutions that are implemented on large pieces of land. Where is land today, right? There is high competition for land use. The land either comes from private owners, which then can do other things than restoring nature from a financial viability aspect, right? So it's a huge change management process project developers have to implement with the private landowners, or it's government land. Now, when you talk about government land from an investor perspective, there's massive uncertainties, right? So, if you look at the 198 countries that are there, and if you look at voluntary scene, there are only a handful of countries that have clear regulations when it comes to land use, carbon tenure, banking of these credits investments, right? So that's another challenge we're dealing with. While in India, broader Asia, there might be companies that have some experience developing carbon projects, right? But if you look at historical market, I would say 70% of the market has less than 4 years of work experience as an organization on developing nature-based solutions. This is also a challenge because, I mean, putting trees on ground is one, writing your PDD is another, managing this project for a long period. These are complex issues which have to be tied together to deliver a carbon project, right? And then we talk about this whole monster called quality. Yeah, just because you put a bunch of trees on ground doesn't mean that that represents quality, right? I mean, now we can go into carbon world jargons, additionality, permanence, methodology, compliance. And basically what all this translates is, are you able to deliver a project that has impact not only on environment, on community, on biodiversity, and the broader spectrum of stakeholders, right? Because every stakeholder has a different interest when they participate in a carbon project. It's not always aligned. If it's a private landowner in the global south, hunger comes before environmental sustainability. Healthcare, education, they're different. I mean, everybody is in a different hierarchy of need, right? And you can't have the same quality of conversation with the buyer, with the project developer, and beneficiaries, right? So it's a complex system we operate in. And I mean, these all collectively add up to this delay in implementing projects, getting them off the ground, issuing credits, right? That's where the market is, from a historical current point of view. But where is the market going today? I mean, even 3 years back, right? Buyers were buying projects from an eucalyptus plantation. Yeah, that was a thing, There were buyers who were buying credits at $12, $14, $15 because they were cheap. They were coming from green projects, right? And what is a green project? Anything that looks green, has a bunch of tree, is a green project. And that used to be also considered as nature-based solutions. But today, no, the buyers are more conscious. Yeah, it's, maybe for good reasons, maybe for bad reasons, whatever it is, right? For reasons that are organization specific, they understand a bit of quality. Monoculture projects, no one is touching them today, right? Eucalyptus projects will soon be a thing of the past. Why? Because there's considerable amount of harm you do to the environment rather than the positive aspects, right? From an investor buyer point of view, transparency is number one today, right? I mean, we've been pointed it out briefly earlier, right? So if you're putting in trees on the ground, you have to be accurate on the number of trees you put. Overestimation is a thing in the carbon market, right? So, especially with early stage projects, everyone wants to have a very attractive IRR for investors. You could sell it today for whatever reasons, but the challenge is in 3 years, when you have to deliver on this IRRs, when you have to deliver on this ERs, right? It becomes a nightmare, not just for the project developer, the entire ecosystem of stakeholders, right? Because the communities have a certain expectation, the governments have a certain expectations, developers have a certain expectation, intermediary like us, we have to manage the shit show that comes in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. My biggest challenge today at work is managing delivery. I mean, that's not something we are supposed to be doing as an organization. We're supposed to be managing the finance flow, right? We're supposed to be getting corporates invest in early stage projects. But today, because how the market has been functioning for the last 4 or 5 years, it's predominantly expectation management. That's what we're doing today, right? Which is not what all of us have to be focusing on. Yeah. That's around transparency, but the market is also evolving. There's a lot of high integrity frameworks out there. I mean, you could look at ICVCM, you could look at CCPs. They're setting out some state of art expectation from nature-based solutions, right? I mean, we could also talk about core benefits, what NBS brings. At Good Carbon, we focus on your nature-based solutions. There's a simple answer why we do that. If there was $1 to be invested, it should be invested in a place where you're able to derive triple impact, right? I mean, triple impact is basically address the triple crisis we are living today. Nature, of course, is one, nature, climate, right? Poverty is an equally important problem because global south, I mean, most of us today on this call are from the global south, right? You've seen Pakistan, you've seen north of India, you've seen most of the African countries which are going through this phase of poverty, which is then interlinked with climate, which is then interlinked with the biodiversity loss, right? So these are the triple benefit of investing in nature-based solutions. Yeah. So co-benefits become really, really important going forward. It's just not about, are you able to conserve a bit of species? Are you able to do a bit of revenue sharing with the communities? It's a more complex problem, right? So what investors are looking for is not the absolute benefit you're able to deliver. It's more around the structure of your project, right? How do you plan to address a structural problem? That's key of nature-based solution, because it's nature-based solution, right? It's not tree planting solution, or it's not number of trees planting program. And there are a lot of different programs. We call it nature-based solution because a nature-based solution is supposed to deliver a solution for a specific set of problems, which could be climate, biodiversity, community, whatever it is, right? And then there is this what investors also look for. What's your project design like, right? So what's your theory of change? It's not your crediting period. That's what methodologies like GCC ensure, that during the crediting period, they stick to certain bare minimum standards, which is then ensuring the project crediting period and safeguards the project during the credit period. It's basically what happens after that. Yeah. So this is where today intermediaries, assessing agencies, rating agencies, all are becoming more and more important, right? What registries do is they put out a methodology based on which, these are basically guiding principles for project, right? Some methodologies are rigorous, some are loosely knitted. Basically, they ensure that there is minimal safeguard around climate, biodiversity, and community issues or aspects. What does an intermediary do, right? It's not our job to put out a methodology or put out guiding principle how a project should be designed. That's what standards do. What we do, or where our values come in, is, if there is a methodology that's put out for a particular asset class or project type, within that methodology, there are high quality projects and low quality projects, right? So, if you look at it, anything that checks a number of boxes are eligible for registration and eventual issuance, right? And now, where does the quality gap then come from? This is also then from a market perspective, where is the price difference coming from, right? Why is the mangrove project selling at 28.50 and why is the mangrove project selling at 70, right? Where is this gap? And that's basically coming from the quality difference. And someone like Good Carbon, when we come in between for a quality assessment, we are then doing a deep dive as to how these projects are performing, not just today, but for the next 40 years. Yeah. And at Good Carbon, we use something called a nature analytics framework. That's basically our proprietary framework. And this is not just Good Carbon, right? Good Carbon, we do what we do, but there are many other players in the market who are also doing similar assessments to us. So at Good Carbon, we are assessing roughly about 160 parameters in a project. This can be, broadly split into impact, permanence, and risk. When you talk about impact, we're looking at, of course, the environmental impact, the biodiversity impact, the community impact. But then, if you would like to break it down, it's not just asking question like, do you have a revenue sharing mechanism, right? It's basically going back to, if you are looking at community, for example, right? When did communities come into the project, where they consulted for the design phase, right? So how is the benefit sharing being set up? It's not just about, is it 20%, 50%? It's basically who gets to decide what is done with the carbon revenues, or how is it monitored long term, right? So, like Good Carbon, many others are also doing this. So basically, this is where we, intermediaries, assessment agencies, rating agencies, are basically about able to bring out a certain amount of confidence to investors. Yeah. Teresa also asked if you could take a look at one of the project that's actually doing a great job. My favorite project in this context would be the Mikoko Pomojo from Kenya. It's a blue carbon project. It's a fairly small project. This is based on community land. These communities they are custodians of land, right? So they don't own land, but they have IP rights on the land for using sustainable harvesting, extraction for their personal needs. But then, if you look at, there is an very interesting study done by the Scottish NGO on Global South and mangrove presence in these regions. 100% of the mapping coincides with poverty, right? Mangrove usage, poverty. That's a very there is very, very clear coexistence of these issues and ecosystems. And if you look at these communities, it's not their interest to do negative or harmful practices to these ecosystems, but by nature of poverty or nature of need, then they enter this issue of overexploitation, which becomes then a norm in these communities, right? And what this project in Kenya has done is it's understood the needs, it's understood the long-term benefits the project gets, and then it's packaged this into a beautiful project. And then, when you talk about Global South, there's also then this thing about how do you use the funds, who gets to administer it. So there's a very democratic way of disbursement of funds that's been set up, where the communities actually vote for programs within their community that's needed. It could be cold storage, it could be sanitization, it could be health, whatever it is, right? And the communities actually write in a project style, they write a request for funding, and the fund is jointly monitored by the official landowner, that's Forest Services, the communities, and the project developer. This way, you're able to not just bring out the value, but you're also able to deliver sustainable impact to these communities, right? And then there is this massive debate in the market. Yes, we all want to do good projects, right? We all want to deliver impact, but then who's paying for it, or are the corporates willing to pay for it? While I cannot answer this today, but there is a very clear indication, right? So if you looked at historical buying behavior of corporates, that was in the range of $10, $20. And then there were a few mangrove projects that were in the $30 range. But if you look at the forward, Quantum just published their Q3 analysis, right? So the forward offtake investments have increased considerably. If you also, we are in the sweet spot of looking at the pricing because we have this intelligence in-house. If you're looking at VM47 in particularly, the market is now heading towards $30, $40, $50 price point, right, in 2020s. If you look at 2030, 40 forward offtakes, there are also pricing that going in the range of $60, $70. So there's a clear indication that there is willingness to pay. But these are also forward offtakes, right? There's a bit of uncertainty that is associated with offtakes. Will the project perform? Will the corporates deliver? Is the commitment then permanent? Is it a lasting trend, or would there be another Guardian article that will, push the voluntary carbon market 5 steps back? Right? We've recovered from the scandalous articles that came out 2 years back. Mostly recovered, but then let's see how the market progresses. Yeah, Teresa, back to you. If there are any questions, happy to answer them. If not, Teresa, back to you.
Hello, everyone. This is Associate Director of the GCC and the AMBS. I'm very honored to meet you all in this webinar. Thanks for organizing everything from the Teresa and the team of the ProClime. So GCC is the only internationally recognized carbon crediting program originating from the Global South, headquartered in Doha, Qatar, since 2016. As you can see the slide of that in this figure, that GCC serves as a leading platform that bridges developing and developed markets in advancing high-integrity climate actions. It is fully eligible under the CORSIA framework and then accredited by the ICROA as a recognized carbon offsetting standard. Today, the GCC has another type of the labeling system in terms of tracking the sustainability to meet the goal of the SDG target. And of course, we are mostly dedicated to get the positive approval from the ICBCM right now, and then we almost get there. So hopefully, next couple of weeks later, we will announce to that we are successfully get the approval from the ICBCM as the CCP plus level. Please, next slide. Okay, as you can see, there is today the GCC has engaged approximately 1,540 carbon reduction projects only across the 45 countries, with a cumulative issuance target on 2 billion CO2 ton by 2032, contributing substantially to the global carbon neutrality and the implementation of the Paris Agreement. Okay, as you can see, the region variety on this slide, and then there is no such registered MBS project yet, because compared to the Vera and GS, which is the gold standard, GCC is likely unscratched the lottery ticket, newly emerging, yet full of untapped the potential. While it has only recently entered in the global stage, it already demonstrated strong advantages in terms of the high integrity with the CRISIA eligibility and the operation of a digitalized registry. I'm gonna not detail about the whole things regarding this high integrity and the digitalized registry though, but my colleague Dr. Wojciech will present some technical issue, because already our presenter before the ProClime, Mr. Bipin, mentioned that there is an issue of the high integrity. We can solve the problem based on the scientific background, and then of course the methodological approaches using the high tech or aligned with the Paris Agreement or something like that. So floor is yours, Dr. Wojciech. Please share your thoughts regarding the high integrity and the method.
Yeah, it's my pleasure and honor to be invited to this webinar. I'm waiting for my presentation. Yeah, thank you. So we began. Okay. GCC nature-based solution methodological approach is based on CDM approach, because we think that this was one among the best approaches. However, we would like to avoid this what CDM reforestation inherited from political process that led to it. I will not go into details, but this is very interesting story. Next, please. Yeah, our methodologies cover in full or to a great extent majority of activities which are listed here in this slide. Next, please. Okay, so you can see here how transparency is included in our methodologies. So our methodologies are organized very much like computer programs, which means there is major program here marked as methodology. And this major program calls for tools. These tools call for their data and they perform action. For example, tool 1, based on data, may deliver credible baseline. Tool 2 may deliver verifiable demonstration of additionality, and so on and so on. So we have identified elements in methodologies which are repeatable among many methodologies. We have managed them in such a way that each repeatable activity is turned into tool. So our new methodology uses new tools, but also old tools which were prepared for other methodologies. So it is easy to understand the new methodology, because if project owner, project developer knows tools, then he sees only that methodology is instruction, how to use these tools and how to organize outcomes of these tools in order to get GHG emission reduction removals. So what is outcome of this type of approach? It's very high transparency. It is very high transparency because each tool is transparent on its own. Methodology as a program which calls for tools is also transparent. So the outcome is very much transparent. It's very easy to go step by step and to understand how each element which was developed in the methodology, how each numerical estimate was arrived at, what kind of data were used and what kind of calculations were used. So if you could go to the next slide. Yeah, the next slide will allow me to say thank you very much for your attention, and I'm very much open for your questions because due to time limitations, it was difficult to go into details in this presentation, but I'm sure that you may have many questions and I will be happy to respond to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Fantastic. I'm just going to sort of ask the question that is prime and center in my head right now. And that is an amalgamation of all the stuff that we've already discussed. So from a developer perspective, the challenges that Bipin illustrated, from Chinmay's perspective, the challenges that he illustrated, and the opportunity that you are mapping with the GCC methodology. There is this one question that is lingering in my head, and I'm hoping that we can answer it as a forum. Look, there is a technical requirement for any project to be scalable, feasible, bankable, for it to have high integrity, to have permanence. And to Chinmay's point, there is a right thing to do. There is high technical qualification required, and there is a right thing to do. So there are two things that my question actually comes from. One is when junk credits are flushed out of the market, right? There is still an overhang of junk credits. When that is flushed out of the market, what should the speed of validation of registries be for us as a collective to be able to make the deliveries that Chinmay was talking about earlier, where when you have delivery requirements and you don't have credits to sell, I think it is indicative of the top of the funnel as well, where right at the registry process, the registration process itself can take 3 months and sometimes more. And that puts a delay through the entire system, making everybody jittery along the way, investors, project developers, community, because everything is interlinked. How do we solve for that? This is an open question to the forum. Whoever wants to start, whoever wants to lead. I'm also going to touch upon what Chinmay was talking about, the permanence beyond crediting period as a fundamental differentiator as we go along. So if we can touch upon things, floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. I will take the question first for both of the questions. We need to understand something very clearly from Vipin's presentation. Vipin made a very good statement which said trust drives value, and that trust has eroded over a period of time. And we should not say junk credits, but there have been a lot of influx of things that came in which should not have come in. So it takes time to rebuild trust. Now, once that is done, then you have to establish that the trust is maintained for a longer period of time. And that is where the validation and verification bodies play a huge role. Of course, the standards also play a huge role. And we, as a standard, we try to ensure that we remain stringent on the technical side of it, but we also understand the practicality of the scenarios. So it's a question of attaining a balance between the speed of delivery, the stringency that we need to employ so that the trust does not erode again, and at the same time, we are practical about how these projects are being implemented. So it's very difficult. You see, you have to come to those 3 points, and Chinmay mentioned something that how the projects are actually having impact on the ground, how it is benefiting. And Chinmay mentioned a checklist sort of thing which had 160 parameters. Now, we as a standard, we have our own validation and verification standards that the verifiers and the validators have to follow. And I think it's more than 160 parameters in our own standards, which has to go through not only the technical part of it, which is only the methodology part, but also the social part, the legal part, and beyond legal compliances, what you are doing more to serve the community better. All these things are part of the registration cycle. Now, we have to understand these cycles very well. So the project registration is only the first part of getting a project into this carbon market scenario. The delivery of the project, I think it was again Chinmay who mentioned that the delivery would be starting maybe 5, 6, 7 years down the line. And that is the nature of NBS project. It has nothing to do with the validation cycle or the verification cycle itself. Because the trees, when you are doing an ARR project, for example, you have to allow for the trees to grow to a certain extent to have some verifiable carbon credits from those trees. So it's a question of striking the right balance, as I said. And in our process, what we have done is that we have ensured that whenever to us from the validation body, we have a very strict timeline. We have to respond back to between a time of 6 to 8 weeks, so that they get a response as fast as possible from our side. But of course, the validation and verification bodies will also take their own time to assess a project. So a project documentation, when it is prepared and the necessary steps have been done properly, stakeholder consultations, proper monitoring protocols put in place, and so it can go very fast. If it is not so, if it comes to us and we again send it back, and there is a couple of back and forth, then the timeline extends. So this is something that as project developers, people have to keep in mind. On the question of beyond crediting period control, this is something that we term as the permanence period or long-term credits from nature-based solution projects. So what is done in that case is, for us, for GCC, what we do is we have we have the choice of crediting period of between 15 to 30 years for a particular cycle, but that can be renewed, and the total amount of crediting period can be up to 100 years. Now, what we ensure is that the permanence period goes beyond the crediting period to a certain extent, so that any project which does not qualify as long-term, let's say a 15 years project, we cannot qualify that project as a long-term project. In a 15 years project, hence a monitoring system has to be put in place, which would take into account whether there is any reversal meaning whether there is any loss of carbon happening for that particular project for a period of up to 45 to 60 years. And that period can go up to 100 years if the crediting period increases. So that is how we ensure that the permanence period goes beyond the crediting period, and the credits are always long-term. So if it's a shorter period, then you'll have to have a longer permanence period. If the crediting period itself is going up to 100 years, then it is a sufficiently longer amount of time to ensure the permanence of it. So there are a couple of aspects that we take into account. That is how we have built our standard to ensure the permanence and the integrity part of it. We are also, Jesse mentioned, we have applied for the ICBCM approval as well. We are hopeful that it will be coming in the next month probably. We are also certified. We were certified for CORSIA phase 1 and pilot phase. We have also applied for CORSIA phase 2, which is for the airlines, as you might know, and that would also be coming in very shortly. So we hope that going through these tests of passing an ICBCM or a CORSIA requirements or proves that the standards that we are putting in place are of very high integrity, as well as it's practically implementable. So that's how we would like to place ourselves.
Thank you, Shramik. Just want to quickly, for the benefit of our audience and for us, when you say that when someone submits for validation, that if everything is up to spec, they can register the project really fast. What is that timeline? What is a good go-to market from a GCC perspective?
Go-to market meaning
From the time of me registering it to me being able to go in and start selling the credits or go in and start investing in the project.
Okay. So the investment of the project can start immediately. And so in some projects, it may start before the registration completes as well. So in the GCC processes, or for that matter, for any other standard, there's always a prior consideration that you need to submit to the standard. that you had considered the benefits from carbon markets and you are implementing that. So that form remains online. For GCC, it's a very transparent mechanism, so it will remain online, and anybody can see the validators and verifiers can check whether the prior consideration was done. And once the prior consideration is submitted and the documentation preparation has started, that documentation can be prepared and the project can also start implementing at the same point of time. Registration, there is always some amount of uncertainty in the registrations. You know, I mean, whether the project is going to get registered or not. That's a difficult question to answer even for us as a standard, because it depends on the project and it depends on how certain other aspects of a project is also looked at, mainly regarding baseline and additionality assessments and so on. So if you are waiting for the registration to happen and then starting to implement the project, which is possible, the time from starting to implement the project and when you are going to sell the credits, that can be, for an NBS project, it can be quite possibly up to 5 years time. You have to allow that amount of time for the tree to grow. You are planting a tree basically at some point of time, or you are doing it's an integrated forest management project or agricultural land management project. In all those cases, the carbon stock that has grown or the carbon benefit that is accruing, you need to allow it to accrue to a certain extent to make it economically sensible to do the verification at one go. Otherwise, you are not going to do verifications for small chunks of carbon credits. It's a costly, there is a cost attached to it, right? So
Absolutely agree with you.
You have to wait for a chunk of project to be developed. For NBS projects, we would say that the minimum time frame would be for new projects. It would be about 5 years time. Once a forest matures, then probably the carbon accumulation happens faster for a certain period of time when the growth is happening at a faster pace. So that's probably the right way to say.
I'm going to ask Chinmay. Chinmay, do you see delivery of credits being affected by the registration process? Do you agree with what Soumik has to say? Any thoughts on that? And then Bipin, if you have any thoughts, I want to hear that as well.
Yeah, I mean, on delivery of credits, absolutely right. What Souvik said is 100% accurate. And it's twofold, to be honest. It's a standard's capacity to process documents par with market needs, but it's also project developers' capacity to deliver high quality documents, right? So if the documentation is at par with what the standard requires, then you see minimal front and back. But if the documentation is not up to the standards, then it takes much longer to get a project registered and eventual issuance process. But just to add to your initial question, right, on how do you ensure permanence beyond crediting period? I mean, considering we are really out of, I mean, we could go through a 3-day workshop to counter this topic, but considering we don't have much time right now, my very short take on that would be clear exit strategy, right? When you design a project from investor market point of view, we are always looking at how does the project ensures that historical problems do not repeat in 20-30 years from the project starting time or after the crediting period. It could be, I mean, grazing issues. It could be deforestation issues. If these elements are already covered in the project design, basically theory of change is then able to counter these issues, right? In the long run, a project should be designed in such a way that the primary cause for degradation, deforestation, or whatever it is, it's addressed through the project design. And this is basically your exit case, that in 40 years or 30 years or 15 years, whatever the crediting duration is, you've demonstrated the impact in such a way that there is no need for the degradation or whatever the problem to recur, right? So it comes down to your exit strategy, which is then based on your theory of change.
Fantastic. And you've brought me to the last, but not the least person in this discussion. Bipinji, what do you have to add to the theory of change? I know you've been championing it in a huge way. So I think this comes down to a very significant point in today's discussion.
Sure. Thank you, Teresa. My friends, my GCC friends and everyone has covered everything, that would require in terms of theory of change. But my personal experience, or what I would see on top of it, is the risk mitigation, risk identification and risk mitigation. We should be highly proactive in all those processes, and we'll have to quickly identify the risk and put the mitigation plan in place, or the solution in place. Then all these projects would make sense. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense on the ground. Yeah, that's what I would like to add.
Fantastic. Thank you. And we are just in time. We have answered all the questions in the chat. All of you who sent us questions, thank you so much. If we are good, then we can close today's discussion. Thank you so much for joining. And this, for me, was a wonderful conversation. And I've got a notebook full of notes from everything we've discussed, and it feels like there's so much to unpack. So thank you so much for your time, Team GCC. Thank you so much for your time, Chinmay. And thank you so much, Bipin. Till we meet again on the next webinar. Have a nice week ahead, and thank you for your time.
Sure. Thank you,
Thank you.
Preeta.
Pleasure.
Thank you, friends. Yeah, bye.